Let me pose a question on that cuts across technology, ethics, and identity. How is it that a species capable of engineering robotic explorers to the fringes of the solar system, some of which now drift silently through interstellar space, has not yet solved the most elementary of human needs, feeding its own children? We've unraveled the code of life, cracked open the nucleus of atoms, ignited artificial stars in our laboratories, and built neural networks that mimic decision-making. Yet, across the same Earth, we witness an alarming rise in depression, a collapse in institutional trust, and a deepening loneliness that permeates even the most densely connected cities. This is not simply a contradiction, it is a profound paradox. We have mapped the heavens, but we remain confounded by our own inner terrain. We stream in high definition across continents, but struggle to hold eye contact across a dinner table. We simulate universes on screens while neglecting the very reality that sustains us. This isn't the vision of the future once promised in science fiction novels and World's Fair brochures. It's something else entirely. It's as though humanity has been handed the throttle of a spaceship, yet no one stopped to explain how inertia, acceleration, or even trajectory works. We move faster, consume more, communicate constantly, yet understand less about where we're going and why. So perhaps the question isn't just what's coming next. A deeper, more consequential inquiry is, will we be ready to meet it? Because readiness isn't merely about technology, it's about maturity, cognitive, emotional, and moral. And in that regard, I fear we've mistaken advancement for wisdom. We've built cities visible from orbit, yet allowed millions to remain in darkness, both literal and metaphorical. We've peered into the quantum fabric of the cosmos, yet seem incapable of extending compassion across an ideological divide. We celebrate artificial intelligence, but ignore the erosion of natural empathy. We are captivated by our tools, distracted by their novelty, unaware that without anchoring values, innovation can become aimless or worse, destructive. The future does not arrive as a neutral force. It is shaped deliberately or accidentally by the decisions we make, the priorities we hold, and the stories we choose to believe. And right now, the dominant story seems to be one of speed without direction, power without restraint, and connectivity without connection. So look up not just with your eyes, but with your awareness. Out there, in the great cosmic expanse, stars are being born from the remnants of ancient ones. Galaxies collide, black holes form, and light that began its journey billions of years ago is only now reaching our telescopes. The universe, vast and indifferent, continues its unfolding without pause. And yet somehow, within that cold expanse, life took root on a small blue planet. Consciousness emerged, not as a certainty, but as a rare, anomalian, exquisite fluke of chemistry and time. Your awareness, your capacity to reflect, to question, to care, these are not trivial byproducts of evolution. They are astonishing, they are fragile, and they are unfinished. Because evolution doesn't just sculpt biology, it tests behavior, it refines awareness. And in this age, where the tools we wield can alter climate systems and decode genomes, our next evolutionary leap may not be physical at all. It may be the emergence of a deeper consciousness. Your brain, 3 pounds of intricate biological tissue floating in cerebrospinal fluid, encased in bonus, by all accounts, the most complex object we've ever discovered in the known universe. It contains more synaptic connections than there are stars in the Milky Way. It processes, imagines, dreams, and reflects. And yet, it was not designed for truth, it was designed for survival. Evolution doesn't optimize for clarity, optimizes for efficiency, for pattern recognition, for comfort. That's why we cling to stories. That's why we build cultures, rituals, ideologies, because the human mind abhors uncertainty. And so we wrap the chaos of existence in layers of meaning, some beautiful, some dangerous, but all in some way constructed. The challenge is not that we build these narrative zits that we often forget. We're the ones who built them. The scaffolding becomes invisible. The myth becomes a system, and systems left unexamined calcify into dogma. Civilization, then, is not merely a collection of tools and cities. It's a living story we tell about who we are and how we ought to live. But what happens when that story stops aligning with observable reality? When the values encoded in our systems conflict with the survival of the biosphere that birthed us? Every other species on Earth lives within the constraints of balance. Trees do not hoard sunlight. Wolves do not overhunt their prey. Ecosystems self-regulate through feedback loops honed over millions of years. But humanswe, imagine. We project. We construct symbols. We override biological checks with economic abstraction. And in doing so, we've become the only species capable of destabilizing the planetary system that sustains us. That's not pessimism, it's responsibility. Because within that same cognitive capacity lies the power to redirect, to reframe, to redesign. We can simulate worlds, yes, but can we also imagine new models of civilization that operate not on dominance, but on coherence? Can we design economies that reward regeneration over extraction? Policies that prioritize collective well-being over partisan victory? Technologies that amplify wisdom rather than addiction? These aren't hypothetical questions. They are the defining challenges of this moment. Because the truth we seldom confront is this: technology is not neutral. It inherits the values of its creators. An algorithm doesn't ask what's true, it optimizes what's engaging. A social platform doesn't reward empathy, it rewards outrage. And the tools we build, when unexamined, begin to reshape the builders. So here we are on a planet that orbits a star that is one of hundreds of billions in our galaxy, in a universe that has no obligation to accommodate our ambitions. And yet, we find ourselves with unprecedented influence over the fate of this Earth. One species, with the capacity to shift the climate, rewrite the genome, and shape the neural architecture of future generations. Never before, in 4.5 billion years, has the evolutionary trajectory of an entire biosphere hinged on the behavior of a single kind of primate. That primate is us, you, me, all of us. This is not a metaphor. It is a scientific fact. And it places upon our shoulders a profound obligation not only to act, but to understand the scope of our agency. The question then is not whether we are powerful. We are. The question is whether we can develop the moral and intellectual maturity to wield that power wisely. Because history offers no guarantee that intelligence equates to wisdom. The dinosaurs ruled the Earth for over 160 million years without ever developing the capacity to contemplate their place in the cosmos. We've had that awareness for less than 10 years, and already we are toying with forces that could render our own civilization extinct. Nuclear fission, planetary warming, artificial general intelligence. These are not villains in a science fiction plot. They are real, measurable, accelerating, and they require from us not just technological sophistication, but existential clarity. Because the frontier is not out there, not in Mars colonies or quantum computing or biotech augmentation. Those are domains of exploration, yes. But the true frontier is inward. It is consciousness itself. Not the kind of consciousness that reacts, but the kind that reflects, that pauses, that asks, what are we doing and why? Because without that inner calibration, all external advancement becomes a high-speed drift toward unintended consequences. The universe doesn't care whether we survive. The laws of thermodynamics will not shed a tear if humanity collapses. But we care, or at least we can. And that caring, that uniquely human capacity to recognize suffering, to imagine alternatives, to construct futures, not yet born us our evolutionary wildcard, our gift, and perhaps our only chance. Most people assume that awakening or becoming conscious in the truest sense is a dramatic moment, a thunderclap of insight, a sudden shattering of illusion. But in reality, it's often much quieter than that. Awakening begins with a shift in attention. It starts when you begin to question what you've been told is normal. When you ask, not cynically, but sincerely, is this all there is? That question may seem small, but it is seismic. Because in a culture engineered to harvest your attention and sell it to the highest bidder, sustained inquiry is an act of rebellion. We live in a system that doesn't necessarily want you to think deeply. It wants you to consume efficiently, to react predictably. to believe that convenience is the same as progress and that more data is the same as more wisdom. But they're not. Wisdom takes time, reflection, effort, and right now we are drowning in speed. The problem isn't information overload, it's context collapse. It's that we've untethered knowledge from meaning and replaced depth with immediacy. The algorithm doesn't ask whether something is true or even helpful. It asks whether it will keep you looking. It's not malicious, it's mathematical. But when we don't question it, we begin to reflect its values instead of our own. And slowly, imperceptibly, we become not just users of technology, but extensions of it nodes in a feedback loop optimized for attention, not awakening. That is the real battleground, not cyberspace, not AI, but the architecture of your awareness. What you notice, what you ignore, what you assume to be real. And here's the remarkable thing. Science, especially the science of complexity, tells us that in chaotic systems, small shifts can create cascading change. This isn't mystical, it's measurable. A slight variation in initial conditions, what's known as the butterfly effect, can lead to dramatically different outcomes down the line. That's not just true for weather patterns, it's true for societies, cultures, consciousness. So when you choose to act with integrity, to question the script, to offer empathy in a moment of conflict, that's not just a personal virtue, it's a perturbation in the field. It's leverage, it's physics. And it means that what you do, what you think, how you live matters more than you've been led to believe. We often think of influence in terms of scale followers, platforms, reach, but in a complex system, scale emerges from resonance. A single node that is coherent can influence many others. And coherence begins within, not perfection, not certainty, but alignment between your values, your words, and your actions. When those align, you stop leaking energy. You become a signal in a noisy world. And others, consciously or not, begin to attune. This is why consciousness isn't just some abstract philosophical idea. It's a civic responsibility. Because unconscious people build unconscious systems. And unconscious systems, no matter how efficient, eventually fail. Not because of malice, but because they lack feedback. They can't self-correct. They optimize the wrong metrics. We've seen this before. Empires collapse not when they lose power, but when they lose coherence, when the stories they tell no longer match the realities their citizens live. And today, we are approaching that kind of rupture. The climate is a story, the economy is a story, the nation state, the market, the brand, these are all shared fictions propped up by belief, maintained by habit. When those beliefs falter, when the habits no longer serve, the story begins to unravel. But that unraveling isn't necessarily a disaster. In science, we call this a phase transition. When water boils, it doesn't disappear, it transforms. The same molecules, the same elements reconfigure into a new state. Human history has gone through such transitions before agricultural, industrial, digital. Each time, our tools change. But this time, it's our awareness that must change because the tools are now too powerful, too fast, too intertwined with the systems that sustain life. We cannot afford to keep accelerating into a future we haven't yet learned to navigate. We must pause not out of fear, but out of respect for the stakes, for the science, for the sheer improbability of our existence. Because make no mistake, the fact that you are alive right now on this spinning rock orbiting a medium-sized star in a galaxy of hundreds of billions of stars in a universe that may contain infinite others, that fact is astonishing. The carbon in your bones was forged in a dying star. The iron in your blood was once part of a supernova. You are not separate from the cosmos. You are the cosmos made self-aware. And the fact that the universe can contemplate itself through you is not just poetic, it's scientific. And it carries with it a certain gravity. Not just metaphorically, but morally. So the next time you feel powerless in the face of global crises, remember, your awareness is the rarest phenomenon in the known universe. Your capacity to choose to reflect, to imagine, to carry is more than just a biological quirk. It's the edge of evolution itself. What you choose to do with that matters. Not just for you, but for everything your life touches. Because in a very real sense, the future is not something that happens to us. It's something we participate in. One breath, one decision, one story at a time. So here we are on a pale blue dot, suspended in a sunbeam, as Carl Sagan once said, at a moment when our reach exceeds our grasp and our tools outpace our understanding. The question is not whether the world will change, it will. The laws of entropy, evolution, and history guarantee it. The real question, the one that haunts every species capable of reflection, is whether we will shape that change consciously or be shaped by it unconsciously. The next revolution will not be merely technological. It will not be about faster chips, cleaner energy, or smarter machines, though all of those matter. It will be about awareness, about what we value, what we measure, and what we aspire to become. Because the cosmos doesn't owe us a future. It offers us a canvas, not a guarantee. It presents conditions, not conclusions. Whether we meet those conditions with coherence or collapse is up to us. This is not an abstract dilemma. Climate systems are shifting, biodiversity is declining, democratic institutions are wobbling under the weight of misinformation and polarization. These are not glitches. They are signals, feedback loops, indicators that the old paradigms of extraction, domination, separation are no longer sustainable. Nature, as it turns out, does not negotiate. It operates according to principles we either align with or suffer from violating. And those principles are increasingly clear: interdependence, regeneration, resilience. So what does that mean for you, for any individual standing at the edge of this historical inflection point? It means that your choices carry more weight than you've been taught to believe. Not because you're the center of the universe, but because you're entangled within it. Every dollar you spend, every platform you support, every habit you reinforce is a signal, a vote, a subtle but cumulative influence on the trajectory we're all sharing. But even more important than what you do is how you perceive, because perception precedes behavior. If you believe the future is fixed, you will act with resignation. If you believe it is malleable, you may act with agency. And agency anchored in humility and informed by science is precisely what we need now. Not blind optimism, not paralyzing despair, but a courageous clarity that says, we may not know everything, but we know enough to begin. So begin. Not with grand gestures, but with grounded ones. Learn something you didn't know yesterday. Ask a better question. Listen more deeply. Show up where you are with a little more awareness. These are not small things. In a complex system, they are everything. Because systems don't shift by decree. They shift when enough nodes, enough people start vibrating at a different frequency. That is not metaphor. It is resonance. It is how bridges collapse when enough footsteps match their natural frequency. It is how fireflies synchronize in the dark. It is how coherence emerges in nature, organically, unexpectedly, and often beautifully. So if you want to change the world, don't start with the world. Start with what you amplify, what you echo, what you embody. Because someone somewhere is listening, watching, learning what's possible through your example. And remember, the universe is not watching us like a judge, but becoming through us like a process. The atoms that form your body were once scattered across ancient stars. The neurons that light up your thoughts are shaped by forces forged in deep time. You are not above nature. You are of it. And you are not here by accident. You are here in a lineage of cosmic unfolding brief, improbable, and radiant with possibility. So ask yourself, not later, not someday, but now, what kind of ancestor do you want to be? What kind of signal do you want to send into the stream of time? Because long after our names are forgotten, the effects of our choices will ripple on in the climate, in the culture, in the consciousness of whatever follows. The world may not be ready for what's coming next. But readiness is not a prerequisite for participation. It is a product of it. So don't wait for certainty. Don't wait for permission. Begin where you are, with the breath you're holding, with the minds you're inhabiting, with the gifts, however flawed you've been given, because the future is not written in the stars. It's written in us.